trial lawyer. So I'm used to kind of being interrupted and shifting gears. You're not going to mess me up. So if you've got something you want to jump in with, please do. It'll make it a better time, to be honest with you. I can get as boring as any monologue. However, I will try to avoid that. So thanks. I'm going to jump in. So I was raised by an Army officer. I became an Army officer. So heavy influence from day one that I can remember in leadership, just as my father was a model of it. And then I got to practice it. And now some people have a thought about what that means because of the military. And what I will tell you is what it isn't is what probably is stereotypically believed as far as complete autocracy, always yelling at people. It's really what I found was the Army, like everything, it's a people business. Everything's a people business. Insurance, Army, widgets. Think about it. Challenge that thought. And if you come up with something that you think, I mean, other than if you're just an online something and yeah, it's your business, but if you're working with people or whatever, it's a people business, right? If you have employees, you have customers, anything like that. So in the military, I walked in after being commissioned as a second lieutenant. I walked into my first platoon. I was the highest ranking member of that platoon. I also had the least tenure, highest ranking, least experienced. So I could walk in and go, I'm Lieutenant Prickett and I'm in charge today. And that would work for 30 or 40 seconds, maybe, while they stop laughing. And then, you know, God forbid we end up in a combat theater and they could just shoot me. I mean, truthfully. So I had to learn and grow and develop, even starting there. And what most people would see is maybe one of the most autocratic kind of hierarchies you're ever going to find. However, even in that, it wasn't true. Like your rank gets you a minute or two down, then you got to lead. And then when you got to lead, you got to influence. So all of you have different scopes of responsibility related to leadership, but none of you are limited in what you have as an opportunity for influence. You have influence in your families, in your communities, in your workplaces, with employees, with customers, you name it. And that's leading. Right? Whether you're over them in an org chart or not, you have opportunities in this area. So I want to encourage you, don't check out if you feel like you're not a qualified leader for that type of discussion. I'll focus almost entirely on leadership principles today, but they're really just people principles. I was generally successful as a leader over the years, had some successes, obviously lots of mistakes along the way. But one thing I learned along the way was if I arrive, I'm dead. In other words, the minute I think I'm a good leader, I had a person tell me one time they were struggling, to be honest, as a subordinate leader, and they were like, "I'm a general," and later I reflected and I went, "That's it. They're done for now," because they think they're a general. It wasn't in the military setting, but they used that as a metaphor. And I'm like, you can't promote yourself. You've got to stay in this place of ongoing development, or otherwise it's going to be a problem. So foundationally, we'll go there. As far as I know, I invented a word, and that's what I titled my book. And maybe somebody else had said it, but I'd never heard it. And it was the word I invented was respectership. And it was when I was probably TMI, but literally as I was considering the title for that book, I think it was in the shower. I went, there it is. And so, you know, if you need a good idea, I guess take a good shower. But so it's really became this. It's just the foundation of how you lead. And that had come from some study and consideration I'd given into how people work. I love, like, the reason I'm not practicing law full time, even when I was practicing, I was predominantly when I practiced the criminal defense attorney, even though my background was in insurance and insurance claims and spent 17 years in that conflict resolution stuff. Got into the practice of law and became, just by the way it unfolded, a criminal defense attorney, not really doing much, really didn't even like the civil side, really loved the weight of freedom hanging in the balance. So loved going to court, hung out in court a lot. And but so respectership kind of unfolded out of kind of a study of people, truthfully, which was even in the practice of criminal defense law. Why are you in jail? What got you here? What led to this situation? Because you're not just born, right? So we could go into that a whole nother time. Or I don't believe you're just born a criminal. And so so I invented this word. This took us down the road, and the idea. And here's what I want to warn you with, though: the thing that we're talking about today, if you want to consider it with any gravity at all, you should really be careful, because it should be a little scary. Here's what I mean: if you're going to see people and lead people and respect people and influence people, the person you never I've alluded to this already. The person you never let out of your sights is you. So be careful about how much really you're open to, hey, I'm a leader in development. I'm a student of leadership ongoing, because it could get uncomfortable for you depending on where you find yourself. So the idea is kind of leaders grow first. You've heard the book, I think it was written by a Navy SEAL, Leaders Eat Last or Leaders Go Last, I think it is. Well, leaders grow first. If you want them to grow and come along, if you're not out front, forget it. And the idea of respectership is founded, as I studied people some, I landed on this thing that respect, really in an ancient text, was attributed at its core to seeing people. And I thought that was so different than we tend to think of it. We tend to think of, I'm the boss, you should respect me, or I'm the dad, you got to respect me, or I'm the whatever, you got to respect. And even in our culture now, there's this idea of, I was disrespected. Okay, what does that mean? But the idea of respectership as a foundation for leadership is really, is I'm going to see you and treat you for who you are, not just what you can do for me. I'm going to see you for your potential beyond your limitations. I'm going to see you for your potential beyond your contributions. I'm going to see you, in fact, so intentionally over the course of time in relationship that if it becomes evident in some matter of time that you're either a bad fit or you've outgrown this and you shouldn't, we're not married, I will help you do other things because I'll respect you more than I'll squeeze you for results, right? And I think that type of approach is going to be exponentially greater in its return than you work for me, you respect me because I'm in the seat, and then all the ramifications of that. So that's the foundation for kind of how I started down the road. That's right, Sandra, be human first. That's right, which is kind of easy conceptually until the messiness comes out, right? I've been a consultant now for 4 years, and I've worked with a consulting group. And one of the employees of the consulting group it's a coworker, asked my boss, how does Scott get away with what he gets away with? And here's what they meant. I just have a natural style. It's how I'm wired. And I have to watch it because it can be used for good and used for evil. I have a natural style that's super direct. I'm wired for it. I could show you data that says that's how I'm designed, either by nature or nurture. So here's the thing. I tend to, it worked as a lawyer. I get away with direct comments. It works for me, right? I would say there's value in it for all of us, but if we spent some time together, you'd be like, man, you take that you push the edge on that. And my boss was really very flattering in his response to this coworker. How does he get away with it? Because the coworker kind of meant like, almost was tattling a little bit, like Scott's out there busting people up. So, and the boss said, you know how he gets away with it? He goes first. He recognizes his own flaws, he admits his own flaws, and he's open. And then there's permissions, and he's super encouraging. So now I'm telling you my weakness. I'm encouraging you all the time. And by the way, when we have something to talk about, we're not going to talk about the weather for a while. We're going to just go, hey, let's talk about this, right? And so whatever, some combination of that has been, in my own personal style, has worked out over time. But I say that to say that all that stuff starts coming into it. But here's the thing, what I'm starting to describe, depending on kind of our generation, or maybe sometimes our gender, sometimes our background, there could be a number of factors that come into what I'm about to say. But some people will interpret stuff I'm kind of hitting around right now as soft skills. That's what it will get for. It's soft skills. And I would say that is a misnomer. Soft skills actually are a hijacking for well-intended leaders. So in other words, if I ask any leader I work with, big corporation, small company, it doesn't matter. Hey, describe for me, as we first meet, tell me your leadership philosophy and style and approach, or whatever. And they'd almost all the time, I'm results driven. Everybody's results driven. And what I would say to you is the things I'm talking about are entirely results driven. I'm entirely results driven. So we're never going to, results always matter. Results are never not the deal, double negative. They're always the deal. It's just a matter how and why, not so much what, right? So you can drive a mule, so to speak, and then to the ground. So you might get that mule to pull that buggy for however long, but the daggone, I almost cussed, the daggone mule could just fall over dead, right? So the idea is, how do I get the most out of the mule? How do I make sure the mule's flourishing in its purpose? And then how do we together successfully move the thing that we're trying to move or do the thing we're trying to do? So most people get promoted and or find themselves in leadership positions because they were good at something, whatever it may be. Top producers, proficient in their knowledge, salespeople that sell a lot, and this is where the Peter principle comes from, isn't it? So the next thing you know, they get promoted into leadership. And then what we do more often than not is we recognize their expertise, we set them in a position, we give them people reporting to them, and we trust that that's all transferable. And the fact is, it's not just by osmosis, right? Here's where I'm going. The leadership role is actually an entirely different discipline than the discipline that got the individual to the leadership position. You're starting over. And for every promotion, that's true to some degree. Obviously, within the scope or the discipline of leadership, that's a diminishing need because you're growing as a leader, but it's a constant need. Student of leadership, not a general, right? So the idea there is, if we're not paying attention, then we're going to think that so-and-so is going to be great at getting the rest of the so-and-sos to do great stuff. And it may not be true at all. Why? Well, maybe they aren't wired for leadership. Maybe they should have been a producer, or maybe they just haven't been equipped, right? Because everybody kind of wants the recognition of promotions, but some people don't really want to do the leadership role. They really want to be doers, not leaders. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people are better wired as doers, and they can have a much more successful career, right? So so the working definition of leadership that I lean into is this: leadership, as I've come to define it, is is sacrificing for the benefit of others. Sacrificing for the benefit of others. So I think that's a tough lens, to be honest. As a husband and as a dad, I try to start that at home. That was introduced to me probably about 15 years ago. And at first I was like, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? And it took a lot of kind of handling it and dealing with it and thought towards it. And I think I know more what it means now. Somebody just wrote selflessness. But if I sit here and tell you how selfless I am, I could put several family members and quite a few friends up here that would say, yeah, he's lying. He may be this, but he's a liar, right? Because I like me, you know what I mean? And so I sometimes want what I want. And so, yes, there is a selfishness to everyone. But if I'm going to lead, if I'm going to influence, there's an intentionality to sacrifice for their benefit. And the idea there is that is the discipline of respectership. Respectership isn't a leadership style. It isn't a theory. It's just how I'm going to go about leading, how I'm going to make it so that others will flourish when I'm not doing, because I need them to do. Why? Because there's 10 of them and there's one of me. And I need 10 of them to do things that I can only do 1/10 of. Or maybe I'm exceptional and I can do 20%. But still, let's assume that somebody's truly exceptional. If you have a team of 10, now you got a 5 times multiplier, right? So, otherwise, if you're just a doer, I work with leaders right now that are not leaders, they're doers. And they're great doers, but they ain't leading. So the question becomes, you want to cap your limitation? Your organization, or do you want to take the lid off? And the lid comes off with, I'm willing to start with me. I'm willing to admit my own limitations, and I'm willing to sacrifice for your benefit. And that is so easy to kind of just say. Servant leadership, selflessness, sacrifice. It is not easy to do because it stinks. When I want what I want, but I'm giving up what I want for the benefit of the whole, the sacrifice is real, and there's a sting in it more often than not. Patrick Lencioni, I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Patrick Lencioni. If you're not, I would highly recommend him. Fantastic. And he says that he focuses on organizational health. I've learned a lot through his stuff. And he says that very few leaders, and I found this to be true, want to do the hard work of organizational health. Most leaders will opt out. And so I think as leaders, we all get to decide. Am I willing to be sacrificial and do the hard work and ultimately produce a healthy organization, not just that has results, not just focus on results for the results' sake, and have an unhealthy, unsustainable organization where we churn through people go home and they're worse off than we found them. So when I sacrifice for the benefit of others, here's what following is. You'll know if you're doing it or not. So the course of the time, if you're sacrificing for the benefit of others, they'll trust you.
So we have a question
Yep.
on chat.
Go ahead.
How do you drive for results without being manipulative or without appearing manipulative?
Yeah, I got some stuff we're going to hit on, but I'll jump ahead a little bit. 100% candor. I would say candor, simplicity are two key things. So one is, are your goals just super easy? If they can't digest it, I've worked with a leader who I really respect. He's one of the smartest guys I know. I love the guy. He's wonderful. And he is so smart that he asked me one time, what do you see as my biggest leadership gap? And I said, you're the smartest guy in the room, in every room. And it's a strength, but it's your weakness. And here's what I mean. You need an interpreter. People don't get what you're saying. They get a fraction of what you're saying, but your intention isn't making its way over. So I say all that because simple is digestible. Digestible is repeatable. If they can't digest it, they can't internalize it. So the obligation is to make it simple. I worked in corporate America in the claim side. After I left Federated, I went to Chubb for a while, and Chubb was, a big company with a lot of bureaucracy, and this was years and years ago. And I at times, people like staff would bring me something, and I go back and make it a page. I'm not reading all that. I mean, back in my immaturity, I just go, I'm not reading all that. Probably a little rough around how I said it, but which isn't, that's not an isolated incident. So, but what I was saying was, let's make it so that we can agree instead of some treatise that we don't want to, in a drawer somewhere. So do you drive to the results because they know the target, and they know the target because they've internalized the target, and they've internalized the target because it was digestible and it was simple and it was clear. But if your results are universal, if everything's important, nothing's important. So I would start right there, make it a page, whatever that means, right? That's a metaphor, not a rule. But make the stuff a page. What's Greg saying about Chubb? Remember when Chubb and yeah, I was gone by then, actually, Greg. But yeah, I've heard. So anyway, I can hit on that some more because we're going to touch on some of that. And please, any questions are fine. And if you want to, you can raise your little virtual hand, and I'll see you. I think I'll see you. I'm a little ADHD. Results always matter. I'm looking at some. Here's, are any of you familiar with the idea of fundamental attribution error? I got it from Lencioni, to be honest. He got it from somewhere else. So the idea of fundamental attribution error, I think, is your first hurdle when you actually start practicing some of the concepts. And here's what I mean. Fundamental attribution error is this. I want you to judge me by in my language, I want you to judge me by my good intentions. I will judge you on your outcomes. So in other words, to Jen's point or example where she went, you had one job to do. The possibility in the middle of that is some fundamental attribution error is high. What do you mean? Well, all I'm looking at is their outcome. But if I peel that back one layer and start figuring out the why did that fail? Why did we fall short? Look, maybe they're the wrong person on the bus. Maybe they're in the wrong seat of the bus, to use Jim Collins' language. Maybe I wasn't clear in my instructions. That one's tough because it's more common than not. I mean, it's pretty common that our instructions are not near as clear as we think, right? And so things like brief in the military, we call them briefbacks. So if we were going in a direction to get some dialogue about what your understanding of the direction is, especially the more complicated the task or the project, is pretty critical. The next piece. So some of you may have heard the phrase that Peter Drucker's attributed with it, but I don't know that he actually started it. But there's a phrase of culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know if you've heard that before. Like 100% true. Here's the best example I have of that. A few years ago, it was quite a few years ago, there was a pretty new coach. He's gone now at the University of Texas, of which I'm not a fan, despite my background. I do live outside of Fort Worth, Texas, but I really had no affiliation with college football because I went to a Division II school without a football team until 3 years ago. My daughter went to Ole Miss, and now forget it. I am all in, hotty toddy. let's go Ole Miss. So there's nothing like a dad with a daughter in college. Now I have a lot of powder blue and red and blue things. So anyway, we got that going. And now Alabama's coach resigned. So now I'm just literally just hoping, please do not go get Lane Kiffin. So that's where I am on that. So anyway, it was the University of Texas football coach. And he was pretty new to their program, but he was building their program. Ultimately, he failed, just for what it's worth. But at this point, they were making strides towards the goal. And what happened was they had, like, let's say a 3rd and 8. So they needed 8 yards to get a first down. And they threw a short pass to a pretty big receiver. And the big receiver got maybe 3 or 4 yards. So they were going to that's a problem. But what happened is he didn't go down. He got 3 or 4 yards by the design of the play, but he didn't go down. He churned. He ended up carrying people. He got the first down. And what the coach said in his post-game comments, he said that he had told the coordinators over his headset at the end of that play, that's a culture play. Here's what he meant. Our strategy and our tactic didn't get it done. Our culture empowered and motivated him to figure out a way to get it done, despite the fact that what we gave him really didn't work. That's culture, right? And so culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the two primary ways that I would kind of suggest to shape culture does happen, by the way, no matter what. Like it does. I was doing a project with the Alaska Pipeline a few years ago, which probably was my favorite gig. I just loved it. I was in Alaska every month for a year, and it's like magical. I love Alaska. So anyway, I was in there. I was working with the executive team. I'm like, "What's your culture?" And they start, and I'd been there kind of semi-immersed for a little bit, and they start kind of telling me their cultural attributes that they had, and I'm telling you, they were entirely aspirational. In other words, I hadn't observed half of those in practicality. So culture happened, and it did not match the poster on the wall. Does that make sense? So culture is going to happen. The question is, do you want to intentionally shape it, or do you want it to happen to you? As a leader, if you're not shaping culture every day that you wake up and go in, it's happening to you. It's not a one and done. It's not a poster. It's not a t-shirt. It's not a tattoo. It's none of that stuff. It's everyday intentionality. And the two things that I would suggest will take you and your culture in directions you want to go are collaboration and encouragement. Encouragement being really very one-on-one and personal, but out loud and across the room. So encouragement, I would just say specific things that are real. We don't need more pizza parties. We don't need more feel goods. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. In fact, honestly, there are some studies that show they're demotivating. Doesn't mean a pizza party is bad in and of itself, but when it's the only culture tool you use, you probably got a problem. But when you're finding wins, and they can be incremental, but they got to be real, and you're calling them out with specificity, and you're making them public sometimes or private sometimes. Some of that depends on the individual. And so everybody is insecure. Everybody, you, me, everybody on this call, we have insecurities. 10 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, 70 insecurities. And we all have bias. So we're going to talk a little bit. So first thing is encouragement. If you walk in the office every day knowing that everybody in there is insecure, because they are, and you find ways to come against that by affirmation or encouragement, you're going to be the greatest disarmer. You'll disarm insecurities, right? And you got to do it intentionally or you won't do it. Very few of us do it naturally, right? That's one thing. The other thing is collaboration. And I'd say this is a more developed skill. Encouragement's and intentionality. Just do it. Collaboration, you got to do some practice if you're not naturally wired for it. Here's what I mean. Okay, you're having meetings. There are some people in that room that will not talk. They will not talk. Short of them finding a bomb under their seat, they're not going to say anything, right? Or some of them are only triggered to talk if somebody says something that's wrong and they have to correct it because they can't stand it. They'll implode. They have to correct it, but they will not be proactive. Does that make sense? There are ways to figure all that. That's really a lot of what I do is figure out who's in the room. How do we get them in the room? How do we get the right person in the room? How do we manage them right when they're in the room? How do we retain them? How do we figure out, what the markers are? And we do it with data to overcome our own bias and our own insecurities. Because the idea of I hire well and I manage well because by gut, I just get it. No, you don't. You really don't. You may get parts of it, but studies have shown we're 50-50. All of you, me, and the redneck. Right. So get some data, but then the ones that aren't going to talk, if you don't call on them, they're not going to contribute. And if they don't contribute, what's going to happen? Well, sooner or later, their voice is not going to be heard, and they're not going to be aligned or engaged. We're going to come back to alignment and engagement. So if you haven't read the book Death by Meetings by Lencioni, I highly recommend it. Listen to this. This is fascinating. He says you got to create drama. Is that the most amazing statement? So what he means is this: if you're not creating drama, you're probably having boring meetings. Here's what he means: find the stuff that's already there and fix it. I rephrase it as finding the elephant in the room. Leaders are elephant hunters. What's really going on? What are they going to talk about after the meeting? What are they going to tell their spouse about when they get home? It's happening. Culture either happens to you or you intentionally shape it. Go find the elephant in the room and expose it. And it takes courage and it takes intentionality. But if you don't, culture's happening to you, because the elephant is the culture. It's not the aspirational cultural values that are on the poster. Does that make sense? So have meetings that are intentional, invite input, bring issues before they're decided. But it's a voice, not a vote. Set the framework. So it almost goes back to the other piece that we talked about. Somebody said, how do you deal with, I forgot the exact phrasing, but it was a results question. And if you're not clear on what your intention is, then it's going to be a problem. Here's what I mean. If you're not telling them up front, this is a voice, not a vote. I want your input, but ultimately we're going to synthesize and I'm going to have to go in a direction. You're invited, but this isn't a democracy, right? There is still a responsibility disbursement. So just let them know. And then if this is a terrible example, but if Jen's on my team and Jen is, really to herself and never speaks up and is afraid or whatever, then I would make it a play. I would, for every Jen in the room, before we get past the topic, Jen, tell me what you think about that. Watch the elephant in the room, by the way, is more often than not exposed by body language, nonverbals. Pay attention to the nonverbals. Who's taking notes, who's not, who rolled their eyes, who looked away, who's not engaged at all, who's whatever. Just pay attention and ask them. Like, it's okay to miss if you ask them with respect. Here's what I mean. We're in a meeting and something, I do this all the time. Somebody makes a face and I'll go, hey, you okay? Do you agree or disagree with that? And they'll be like, what? No, I'm good. And I have enough relationship. And they're telling the truth. It was nothing. I misread it. There was something that caught my attention, and I'll tell them, well, you made a face, so I want to see if everything was cool. But you know what? They love it over time. Why? Because they know I'm for them. Like, I want your input. If you have input, and if you don't, just say you don't. We're going to move on. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to wrestle you to the ground till you say something. But that's incredibly intentional. If you think about it, it's very respectful. I want to see you. I want to not just hear the things you offer in a I had an interview this morning with a guy that's trying to join an organization I work with. And it took me 45 minutes to get him out of interview mode. I finally told him, I said, finally, thank you. Thank you that now you're not interviewing. Thank you for actually having just a dialogue. Now we can talk real. Why? Because I don't want him to be in a miserable place and I don't want us to miss. Like, it's a win-win, right? Anyway. So collaboration and encouragement, and then the fundamental, the example I give in the book of the fundamental, all of it fits in the fundamental attribution area. Here's what I mean, and culture building, because if we're doing that stuff, we're disarming the I'm going to judge you by your outcomes, but I want to be judged by my good motives. Why? Because we're talking about it. We're handling. You get to handle the material. I get to hear your take on it. We're actually engaging. So in that engagement now, we're building trust. We're building rapport. I'm gaining understanding. You're gaining understanding. There's less likely that you only had one job to do. Well, we know what the job is because we've talked about we talked about vision, strategy, and tactics. We're dealing with it. You get 2 cents on it. Does it make sense? The more they handle it, the more they're going to be aligned. The more they're aligned, the more they'll be engaged. Think of alignment like this. Alignment's a vertical axis. Vertical axis. So it's this: I understand and you understand. up and down any kind of hierarchical picture, like a org chart. I understand. And at the bottom of the organization, if they understand the who, what, why, and how, it's a win. That's basically alignment in one direction. The rest of the picture is I understand. If I'm assuming I'm at the top, if I'm at the top, I understand their need, their who, what, why, and how. What do they need? Why? I work with a young lady right now that, to be honest with you, has a massive attendance problem. Now, truthfully, she's a single mom. I get it, but there's got to be a solution, right? Because it's a problem. We can pretend, or we can talk about it. I can better understand. She can better understand, and then we can get to a place where we can either live with or not. But if we don't, we go there. Why? It's respectful. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. I can't hijack the organization for everybody's personal situation. I had a young lady that worked for me one time that had come out of a really difficult background. I'm going to be really very direct about it. She had been a stripper at one point. She had been a prostitute at one point. She had been abused her whole life. And she had a major life shift a few years before that. She was doing remarkably well. She had had drug addictions. She was very talented, incredibly talented. I wanted her on our team as much as I want, probably more than I wanted some, because the gold, the treasure was pretty obvious, but it came wrapped in some crap, right? A lot of insecurity and some inappropriate, like, she would want to come in on a Monday. I'd say, good morning. How was your weekend? Like, really just common courtesy. And she'd want to tell me about some domestic dispute with a live-in boyfriend. I'm like, nah, we're not doing that. So I'd wait for her to finish. Say, hey, do you need to take a day or take any time? That's it. Why? I want to be healthy, respectful, and safe. Over the course of time, she stayed, she flourished. We both moved on from that organization. I was in touch with her recently. She's got married, doing great. Really is very flattering towards the experience when we were together. But point being is, it took a little bit of intentionality, because you might think on its face, respectorships, I'm going to sit there on Monday morning and talk about your domestic stuff from the weekend. I'm not. And it's not because I don't care about you. I do care about you. However, there's limits, right? Like, not coming to work, we have limits. But I'm going to talk about them. You're not going to, I don't have any hidden agenda. I don't have any hidden goals. Going back to that piece about results, the agenda and the goals and the target is clear and concise, and you can digest it. And anytime we start to stray, we all know. And then engagement. So alignment is vertical, engagement is horizontal. And engagement, that's I own it. Everybody on the team can own their job like they own a business. And then you can look across the way at the next person over, and you can go, you've been able to internalize our target. You know where we're going. We have a culture that is reinforced through both collaboration and encouragement. And then when somebody errors to the left or right, it can self-correct without ever going up. We can say, hey, Mike, come on, what are we doing, man? You need some help? That we're off. That's not what we do. What can I do to help? Or whatever the case may be, right? And so, but I don't even, if I'm at the top, I don't have to know about it. Why? Because they're engaged. They're owning it. When I was still in claims at one point, I was still at Chubb and had become a manager. And I just, my encouragement to even kind of just the individual claims person, my deal was, hey, work this desk like it's your own little shop. Like, you own this desk. This is your business. So how do you make money in this business? And we had metrics, right? And these metrics produce a profitable business for you. If you do and if you need help on how to do it, well, and then what will happen is you're going to do well here. You're going to bonus, you're going to get promoted, you're going to all the stuff, right, that comes with it. But it starts with they're treating it like this is mine. Makes sense in the context. I'd say that in the middle of your own bias, in the middle of your own insecurities, in the middle of attempting to collaborate through those things, I'm going to hit a really broad stroke here. Our own bias is there's really a best way to do it. And I think that's Jen. I'm going to. So I took the liberty of kind of breaking it down into a few categories. And I would say, here's what it is. As a leader, you're probably going to fall predominantly in one of these categories, not exclusively. Visionary, and that's kind of that's an innovative type position. That's always the what if. There are some leaders that are just wired for that. Visionary what if. Now, that's an incredible gift. That's an incredible strength if you think about it, until it's not. What do I mean? If nobody gets what you're trying to do and you're always changing your mind and you're not paying any attention to any of the details, and nobody else is either, because all you care about is innovation, that's great. Talk about a dysfunctional workplace. It is not going to work, right? And it will not be long-term. It will not be sustainable, but it will be fun for a while. And then secondly, as a strategist, which is really results and discipline. That is, we have a vision. How do I break that down into strategy and tactics to get it done, get it done, get it done? Results and discipline. Next is there's more administrative. I work with a guy right now who is a true administrator. I mean, I am not. So it's a beautiful thing, because the great, he does it, he loves it, he thrives it. And truthfully, when he gets outside of that, his weakness starts. I mean, he's strongest in that, and other than that, it's just he gets challenged. And then there's the people person. Like, it's not just HR, but there's people that are just more interested in the employee experience, right? And so all of those are valid. And here's the thing: as a leader, who's on your team? Who are you? If you just went in those 4 categories, who are you? And do you have data for it? Who's on your team? Do you have data for it? Or are you going with your gut, which 50% probably, right? Do the work, figure out you, figure out them. If you have all strategists on your team, there's nothing wrong with that. But what are you going to do to innovate if that's part of your strategy? What are you going to do to administrate if you're just to take care of the details in the books? What are you going to do to improve the employee experience? Whatever your answer is valid as long as it's intentional and rational, right? Logical. So, but if you don't know who's in the room, if you don't know who you are and who they are around you, who your team is, and then you're just kind of shooting at targets and you're not equipped for the target, get the right equipping. It might mean somebody stretches, which can at least be a short-term solution. Or it might mean you need to either add to team or change team, right? All those are valid, but going in blind and going in with gut has really severe limitations. I'm going to finish with one thing, and then I'm wide open to discuss whatever y'all want to talk about. I haven't been able to keep up with chat, so forgive me for that. The last thing is this, and this kind of sucks, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, everything will hinge on your communication, everything. Communication until you're blue in the face. And some of us don't get it. I'm raising my hand. I said it twice. I said it clear. What's wrong with you? Why didn't you understand it? And that's a limp in my leadership. I have to overcome that, because if they don't get it, I didn't say it right. Even if I can prove that I did. Does that make sense? If they don't get it, I got to go change that. It's my job for them to get it. So I communicate differently, communicate again, ask questions, communicate a different way, communicate again. There was a guy who I met one time who was the leader of a global organization. And he said, and so he was really, at the C-level of a big company, you become a bit of an ambassador in addition to other things. So he would travel and he would find himself, he said, all I do is say the same things over and over and over again. It's true. Over and then say it again. And then until you want to throw up and then say it again. Why? They don't get it and they forget. I promise. And you're like, what do you mean? I said it. I sent it in an email and I put it on a poster. For some reason, I'm hanging out on posters today. And so I just say, you just can't it's impossible to over communicate, and you're not as clear as you think. And by the way, it doesn't mean make it longer. If anything, it means it makes it shorter. There are too many. ADHD is a pandemic, right? And it's just people are not going to read the 5-page thing. They're not. So how do you make it 5 words? And that's really where the genius is. And Jen said she feels targeted now. Okay. In the Army, when we used to finish something, we'd go, subject to your questions, this concludes my briefing. So what that means is I'm here to hang out, talk as long as you want, but I don't have anything else to monologue on. What do y'all think? Pushback, feedback, objections, anything's good with me. You can tell me I'm crazy. It doesn't, I'll probably like, okay, that might be true.
So to your point about you can't over communicate, and by the way, we're going to have the drawing too. How about tone? I've always thought that tone of the communications matters, and that's one of the things that you and I classically debated. I think in my history as a leader, I've always been too nice, and it's bitten me in the rear a lot. But I think there's a happy middle there.
Yeah,
I don't know where it is.
I could show you with data that each one of us, more than likely, it could be equal, but more than likely we have either a task over people orientation or a people over task orientation. And that will affect our tone. And there's no question in my mind, Jen, that you have a people over task orientation. It doesn't mean you don't care about the task. But what I would say is then your tone is going to be there's going to be a lot more empathy in it. There's got a lot more kind of relational check-ins along the way. I'm very task over people. There's strength in both. We're moving fast with me, right? We're still moving with you. And more than likely, you're keeping them on the train a little easier than I am, unless I've done a whole lot of work in other areas. When I was practicing law full time, one of the things I really liked is when lawyers communicate with each other, oftentimes you get one word email responses, right? Some of you, like Jen, you might have seen that in claims. So I'm like, are we gonna move for a summary judgment or whatever? Yes, that's it. Why? Well, I'm doing something else now, right? And plus, I'm task over people. So you're going to have a natural style. I think adjusting your style makes sense. Know yourself to lead others. Know yourself to lead others. So first, what's your natural style? Ask some people around you. Am I task or people oriented predominantly? Let them tell you, and do it every once in a while. How am I communicating lately? How's it feel? And then figure out how much you can mitigate and how much it just is what it is. You got to be authentic or it's not going to work. But that doesn't give you permission, right? So I don't know. There's no easy answer for that, right? That's a very fluid thing. But I think the awareness of it, the intentional mitigation of the downside to it, and then the feedback loops on it are all going to be wins. And then the stuff about sacrificing for their benefit. That's what trust looks like too, by the way. If I'm sacrificing for your benefit and I say one thing one day that steps on your toes, but you have enough trust in my sacrifice for your benefit that it's going to be easier to overcome. I know he's for me. That sounded harsh, but we have enough evidence to show he is helping me. That's huge, right? Or the alternate of that is, I know she wants me to get this done, even though she just took 45 minutes to say something that could have taken 2.
Fair.
So, yeah, I think the trust and the dealing with fundamental attribution error on both sides is going to be helpful because the communication is very human and people have good days and bad days. And one day I might need my hand held a little bit more than I do the next. I'm reading the room too, Jen, right? Like if you're managing me, you probably over the course of time figure out, I got to just kind of hand it to him and walk away and let him figure out if he has a question, let me know. If you're managing you might have to go, I'm going to need to sit down, talk through the why, get a few feedback points. You have to read the room a little bit. Yep. Quite a bit, actually.
Any other questions for Scott? All right.
Greg, you made a face. You good?
One quick question. A lot of what you talked about works really well when we're face to face, Scott. We have so many people that are hybrid and that are also remote. And we only see that 10% of the iceberg really, and what we're seeing here. They could have a crying baby right next to them here. The dog, we don't know what's going on with people. We lose that management by walking around, stopping by and check on people. What are some of your recommendations for the hybrid and the remote leadership roles that we have people in now?
Yeah, I went to a large part of my career not believing in the weekly check-ins, and truthfully, it was a reflection of my own kind of short attention span. It felt like a waste of time. And then I got to a boss a few years ago. I was working in a gig, and he had weekly touch points with me that I figured out over time. And he was not touchy-feely at all. He was more task-oriented than I am. And I figured out over time, this is really very helpful. So I don't know if you're doing weekly checkpoints with your direct reports. If you are, you got to at least 30 minutes. And this is from a non-believer to I'm a convert, right? And then I would do those by Zoom. It's why I invited everybody to turn their video on and then ask questions. Go with your gut on your questions.
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you get some. So I got a nonverbal from you when I asked you, do you have a question? Right? There was a little flinch. I'm like, hey, what's that? That's a nonverbal. Same thing. If you're meeting with somebody every single week and you're getting verbal and nonverbal feedback from them, you're going to start painting the picture.
Mhm.
And here's what often happens is, I think this is catastrophic. Leaders will schedule time as an ongoing thing with their subordinate direct reports, and then that's the first thing they'll sacrifice.
Mhm.
Well, why don't you just tell them you don't matter? Why don't you just send them an email that day and go, you know what? I don't really give a damn about you today, but I'm going to pretend I do by keeping this meeting scheduled. I'll see you in 3 months when I actually keep the meeting. So awesome. Why don't you just take the whole thing off the calendar, because that's a better message than pretending and then just stepping on them every week.
Right.
But there's a little taste of the directness, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, I have 2 winners for the drawing for Scott's book. I swear you saw me, I didn't look, but it's Greg Golson and Sherry Moore. And I will jump online and get those out to you. Also, for those of you that won the books from the Greg Gray presentation, those were just shipped. We had a problem at the publisher, but they're coming.
Is there anything in the chat that I should have said something about?
I think you just answered it, honestly.
Okay.
Before Greg's question, not Sherry, geez, I've got Sherry Moore on my mind. Sandra asked about specific techniques to recommend in virtual meetings versus in-person meetings to get engagement.
And I touched on it briefly, but
Yeah.
if you're running your team meet, the camera's got to be on for employees, right? They got to turn the camera on. So but you don't you just make that the deal. This is our culture. Otherwise, you're just missing too much.
Yeah.
And it just takes 1 more or 2 more steps of intentionality, doesn't it, when you're not in the room together?
And a little more energy.
A little more. And you probably want to, if you can, if it's logistically and financially feasible, be intentional on at least, I mean, the more in-face touch points you can have throughout the year, the better. But I recognize there's limits.
All right. Anyone else?
All good.
Scott, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, everyone that attended. And I will get those books out to our winners. And y'all have a wonderful day. Go out and kick some butt.
Thanks, y'all. Pleasure meeting with you.
All right. Bye-bye.